Welcome back to Classic Stories and Fairy Tales. I'm your host and narrator, Jerry Coble, and today we are going to wrap up the book, The Marvelous Land of Oz by L. Frank Baum. So let's get started with the transformation of Old Mombi. The witch was at first frightened at finding herself captured by the enemy, but soon she decided that she was exactly as safe in the Tin Woodman's buttonhole as growing upon the bush. For no one knew the Rose and Mombi to be one, and now that she was without the gates of the city, her chances of escaping altogether from Glinda were much improved. But there is no hurry, thought Mombi. I will wait a while and enjoy the humiliation of the sorceress when she finds I have outwitted her. So throughout the night, the Rose lay quietly on the woodman's bosom, and in the morning, when Glinda summoned our friends to a consultation, Nick Chopper carried his pretty flower with him to the white silk tent. "For some reason," said Glinda, "we have failed to find this cunning old Mombi, so I fear our expedition will prove a failure. And for that I am sorry, because without our assistance, little Ozma will never be rescued and restored to her rightful position as Queen of the Emerald City." "Do not let us give up so easily," said the Pumpkinhead. "Let us do something else." "Something else must really be done," replied Glinda with a smile. "Yet I cannot understand how I have been defeated so easily by an old witch who knows far less of magic than I do myself. While we are on the ground, I believe it would be wise for us to conquer the Emerald City for Princess Ozma, and find the girl afterwards," said the Scarecrow. "And while the girl remains hidden, I will gladly rule in her place, for I understand the business of ruling much better than Ginger does." "But I have promised not to molest Ginger," objected Glinda. "Suppose you all return with me to my kingdom, or empire rather," said the Tin Woodman, politely including the entire party in a royal wave of his arm. "It will give me great pleasure to entertain you in my castle, where there is room enough and to spare. And if any of you wish to be nickel-plated, my valet will do it free of all expense." While the Woodman was speaking, Glinda's eyes had been noting the rose in the buttonhole, and now she imagined she saw the big red leaves of the flower tremble slightly. This quickly aroused her suspicion, and in a moment more the sorceress had decided that the seeming rose was nothing else than a transformation of old Mombi. At the same instant, Mombi knew she was discovered and must quickly plan an escape, and as transformations were easy to her, she immediately took the form of a shadow and glided along the wall of the tent toward the entrance, thinking thus to disappear. But Glinda had not only equal cunning, but far more experience than the witch, so the sorceress reached the opening of the tent before the shadow, and with a wave of her hand closed the entrance so securely that Mombi could not find a crack big enough to creep through. The Scarecrow and his friends were greatly surprised at Glinda's actions, for none of them had noted the shadow. But the sorceress said to them, "Remain perfectly quiet, all of you, for the old witch is even now with us in this tent, and I hope to capture her." These words so alarmed Mombi that she quickly transformed herself from a shadow to a black ant, in which shape she crawled along the ground, seeking a crack or crevice in which to hide her tiny body. Fortunately, the ground where the tent had been pitched, being just before the city gates, was hard and smooth, and while the ant still crawled about, Glinda discovered it ran quickly forward to effect its capture. But just as her hand was descending, the witch, now fairly frantic with fear, made her last transformation, and in the form of a huge griffin, sprang through the wall of the tent, tearing the silk asunder in her rush, and in a moment had darted away with the speed of a whirlwind. Glinda did not hesitate to follow. She sprang upon the back of the sawhorse and cried, "Now you shall prove that you have a right to be alive. Run, run, run!" The sawhorse ran. Like a flash he followed the griffin, his wooden legs moving so fast that they twinkled like the rays of a star. Before our friends could recover from their surprise, both the griffin and the sawhorse had dashed out of sight. "Come, let us follow!" cried the Scarecrow. They ran to the place where the Gump was lying and quickly tumbled aboard. "Fly!" commanded Tip eagerly. "Where to?" asked the Gump in its calm voice. "I don't know," returned Tip, who was very nervous at the delay. "But if you will mount into the air, I think we can discover which way Glinda has gone." "Very well," returned the Gump quietly, and it spread its great wings and mounted high into the air. Far away across the meadow, they could now see two tiny specks speeding one after the other, and they knew these specks must be the griffin and the sawhorse. So Tip called the Gump's attention to them and bade the creature try to overtake the witch and the sorceress. But, swift as was the Gump's flight, the pursued and pursuer moved more swiftly yet, and within a few moments were blotted out against the dim horizon. "Let us continue to follow them nevertheless," said the Scarecrow, "for the land of Oz is of small extent, and sooner or later they must both come to a halt." Old Mombi had thought herself very wise to choose the form of a griffin, for its legs were exceedingly fleet, and its strength more enduring than that of other animals. But she had not reckoned on the untiring energy of the sawhorse, whose wooden limbs could run for days without slacking their speed. Therefore, after an hour's hard running, the griffin's breath began to fail, and it panted and gasped painfully, and moved more slowly than before. Then it reached the edge of the desert and began racing across the deep sands. But its tired feet sank far into the sand, and in a few minutes the griffin fell forward, completely exhausted, and lay still upon the desert waste. Glinda came up a moment later, riding the still vigorous sawhorse, and having unwound a slender golden thread from her girdle, the sorceress threw it over the head of the panting and helpless griffin, and so destroyed the magical power of Mombi's transformation. For the animal, with one fierce shudder, disappeared from view, while in its place was discovered the form of the old witch, glaring savagely at the serene and beautiful face of the sorceress. Princess Ozma of Oz. "You are my prisoner, and it is useless for you to struggle any longer," said Glinda in her soft, sweet voice. "Lie still a moment and rest yourself, and then I will carry you back to my tent." "Why do you seek me?" asked Mombi, still scarce able to speak plainly for lack of breath. "What have I done to you to be so persecuted?" "You have done nothing to me," answered the gentle sorceress, "but I suspect you have been guilty of several wicked actions, and if I find it is true that you have so abused your knowledge of magic, I intend to punish you severely." "I defy you," croaked the old hag. "You dare not harm me." Just then the Gump flew up to them and alighted upon the desert sands beside Glinda. Our friends were delighted to find that Mombi had finally been captured, and after a hurried consultation, it was decided they should all return to the camp in the Gump. So the sawhorse was tossed aboard, and then Glinda, still holding an end of the golden thread that was around Mombi's neck, forced her prisoner to climb into the sofas. The others now followed, and Tip gave the word to the Gump to return. The journey was made in safety, Mombi sitting in her place with a grim and sullen air, for the old hag was absolutely helpless so long as the magical thread encircled her throat. The army hailed Glinda's return with loud cheers, and the party of friends soon gathered again in the royal tent, which had been neatly repaired during their absence. "Now," said the sorceress to Mombi, "I want you to tell us why the wonderful Wizard of Oz paid you 3 visits, and what became of the child Ozma, which so curiously disappeared." The witch looked at Glinda defiantly, but said not a word. "Answer me!" cried the sorceress, but still Mombi remained silent. "Perhaps she doesn't know," remarked Jack. "I beg you will keep quiet," said Tip. "You might spoil everything with your foolishness." "Very well, dear father," returned the Pumpkinhead meekly. "How glad I am to be a Wogglebug," murmured the highly magnified insect softly. "No one can expect wisdom to flow from a pumpkin." "Well," said the Scarecrow, "what shall we do to make Mombi speak? Unless she tells us what we wish to know, her capture will do us no good at all." "Suppose we try kindness," suggested the Tin Woodman. "I've heard that anyone can be conjured with kindness, no matter how ugly they may be." At this, the witch turned to glare upon him so horribly that the Tin Woodman shrank back abashed. Glinda had been carefully considering what to do, and now she turned to Mombi and said, "You will gain nothing, I assure you, by thus defying us, for I am determined to learn the truth about the girl Ozma, and unless you tell me all that you know, I will certainly put you to death." "Oh no, don't do that!" exclaimed the Tin Woodman. "It would be an awful thing to kill anyone, even old Mombi." "But it is merely a threat," returned Glinda. "I shall not put Mombi to death because she will prefer to tell me the truth." "Oh, I see," said the Tin Man, much relieved. "Suppose I tell you all that you wish to know," said Mombi, speaking so suddenly that she startled them all. What will you do with me then?" "In that case," replied Glinda, "I shall merely ask you to drink a powerful draught which will cause you to forget all the magic you have ever learned. Then I would become a helpless old woman." "But you would be alive," suggested the Pumpkinhead consolingly. "Do try to keep silent," said Tip nervously. "I'll try," responded Jack, "but you will admit that it's a good thing to be alive." "Especially if one happens to be thoroughly educated," added the Wogglebug, nodding approval. "You may make your choice," Glinda said to old Mombi, "between death if you remain silent, and the loss of your magical powers if you tell me the truth, but I think you will prefer to live." Mombi cast an uneasy glance at the sorceress and saw that she was in earnest and not being trifled with, so she replied slowly, "I will answer your questions." "That is what I expected," said Glinda pleasantly. "You have chosen wisely, I assure you." She then motioned to one of her captains, who brought her a beautiful golden casket. From this the sorceress drew an immense white pearl, attached to a slender chain which she placed around her neck in such a way that the pearl rested upon her bosom, directly over her heart. "Now," said she, "I will ask my first question. Why did the wizard pay you 3 visits?" "Because I would not come to him," answered Mombi. "That is no answer," said Glinda sternly. "Tell me the truth." "Well," returned Mombi with downcast eyes, "he visited me to learn the way I make tea biscuits." "Look up," commanded the sorceress. Mombi obeyed. "What is the color of my pearl?" demanded Glinda. "Why, it is black," replied the old witch in a tone of wonder. "Then you have told me a falsehood," cried Glinda angrily. "Only when the truth is spoken will my magic pearl remain a pure white in color." Mombi now saw how useless it was to try to deceive the sorceress, so she said, meanwhile scowling at her defeat, "The wizard brought to me the girl Ozma, who was then no more than a baby, and begged me to conceal the child." "That is what I thought," declared Glinda calmly. "What did he give you for thus serving him?" "He taught me all the magical tricks he knew. Some were good tricks, and some were only frauds. But I have remained faithful to my promise." "What did you do with the girl?" asked Glinda, and at this question everyone bent forward and listened eagerly for the reply. "I enchanted her," answered Mombi. "In what way?" "I transformed her into—" "Into what?" demanded Glinda as the witch hesitated. "Into a boy," said Mombi in a low tone. "A boy!" echoed every voice, and then, because they knew that this old woman had reared Tip from childhood, all eyes were turned to where the boy stood. "Yes," said the old witch, nodding her head, "that is the Princess Ozma, the child brought to me by the wizard who stole her father's throne. That is the rightful ruler of the Emerald City," and she pointed her long bony finger straight at the boy. "I?" cried Tip in amazement. "Why, I'm no Princess Ozma. I'm not a girl." Glinda smiled, and going to Tip, she took his small brown hand with her dainty white one. "You are not a girl just now," said she gently, "because Mombi transformed you into a boy. But you were born a girl, and also a princess, so you must resume your proper form that you may become queen of the Emerald City." "Oh, let Ginger be the queen," exclaimed Tip, ready to cry. "I want to stay a boy and travel with the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman and the Wogglebug and Jack, yes, and my friend the Sawhorse and the Gump. I don't want to be a girl." "Never mind, old chap," said the Tin Woodman soothingly. "It don't hurt to be a girl, I'm told. And we all will remain your faithful friends just the same. And to be honest with you, I've always considered girls nicer than boys." "They're just as nice anyway," added the Scarecrow, patting Tip affectionately upon the head. "And they are equally good students," proclaimed the Wogglebug. "I should like to become your tutor when you are transformed into a girl again." "But see here," said Jack Pumpkinhead with a gasp, "if you become a girl, you can't be my dear father any more." "No," answered Tip, laughing in spite of his anxiety, "and I shall not be sorry to escape the relationship." Then he added hesitantly, as he turned to Glinda, "I might try it for a while, just to see how it seems, you know. But if I don't like being a girl, you must promise to change me into a boy again." "Really?" said the sorceress. "That is beyond my magic. I never deal in transformations, for they are not honest, and no respectable sorceress likes to make things appear to be what they are not. Only unscrupulous witches use the art, and therefore I must ask Mombi to effect your release from her charm, and restore you to your proper form. It will be the last opportunity she will have to practice magic.